Today, we're digging into a really fascinating legal puzzle. How can someone be found not guilty of a crime, but then get dragged back into court for the very same actions? I mean, that sounds like it goes against a basic rule of justice we all know, double jeopardy. But a landmark case shows us exactly how, and more importantly, why it can happen.
So let's just get right to it. Can you be put on trial twice for the exact same thing? Your gut reaction and mine is probably no way, right? That's what double jeopardy is all about. But what if one case is criminal and the other one is civil? Well, that's where things get a little tricky, and it's where one family's story set a major legal precedent.
So let's meet the Sahurkars. After many years of marriage, things fell apart. In December of 2013, Sarika filed a criminal complaint against her husband, Jaiprakash, for cruelty. Okay. Then, just a month later, she filed a totally separate civil case under the Domestic Violence Act. Now, here's the twist. In April 2015, Jaiprakash was acquitted, found not guilty, of that criminal cruelty charge. You'd think that's the end of the story, right? Nope. The court said the other case, the domestic violence one, could keep going. And that right there is where our puzzle really begins.
Okay, so to figure this all out, here's our game plan. We're going to look at how one incident can actually spawn two cases. We'll break down the difference between cruelty and domestic violence because they're not the same thing. Then we'll get into why the rules for each case are so different, reveal the court's final decision, and then wrap it all up by talking about why this ruling is such a big deal. All right, Section 1. Let's dive right back into that central question. We have one single set of events, one incident, but it leads to two completely different court cases. So how on earth is that possible without just shredding the whole idea of double jeopardy? To really get the court's reasoning here, first we have to understand that these two laws are looking for completely different things. So let's break down the legal definitions of criminal cruelty versus civil domestic violence. And when you look at these two side by side, the difference is just huge. The criminal law for cruelty, it's super specific, really narrow. We're talking about conduct so severe it could literally drive someone to suicide or cause a really serious injury. But then you look at the civil law for domestic violence, and it's this incredibly broad umbrella. It covers this whole spectrum of harm, physical, emotional, and, the one that's absolutely crucial for this case, economic abuse. Legally speaking, they're just not the same thing at all. And this concept, economic abuse, is really the key that unlocks this whole puzzle. It's a type of harm that's recognized under the Domestic Violence Act, but it just doesn't exist in the criminal law for cruelty. It's all about being cut off from financial resources you have a right to, like money for basic needs.
So what did this actually look like in Sarika's case? Well, her civil claim was all about things the criminal court didn't even touch. She claimed her husband, who was a lecturer with a pretty good salary, wasn't giving her or their children any money. She said he was living a nice life while they were being deprived of basic needs. She also said she was denied the right to live in their shared home and wasn't getting the monthly maintenance she had asked for. See? These are all textbook examples of economic abuse.
So let's build on that. Because these two laws have totally different definitions, the legal systems that handle them have completely different rules. And maybe most importantly, completely different goals. This chart really lays out the divide. A criminal case? Its whole goal is to punish, to put someone in jail or make them pay a fine. And to do that, the prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a very, very high bar to clear. But then you look at the civil domestic violence case, and it's a totally different ballgame. The goal isn't to punish, it's to protect a victim and provide relief, like getting an order for housing or financial help. And the standard of proof is much lower, a balance of probabilities. All that means is that it's more likely than not that the abuse happened. You know, the judge in the Sahurkar case, Justice Z.A, he basically spelled it out for everyone. He said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, that economic abuse, things like refusing to give your family money, is simply not a crime under the cruelty law. This just drives home the core idea. We are talking about two completely separate legal worlds, even if they started from the same set of circumstances. And that brings us to the big finale, the court's final ruling, where all these pieces come together and they definitively solve our double jeopardy puzzle once and for all. The High Court's logic here was just so methodical and clear. First off, they said, look, cruelty and domestic violence are fundamentally different legal issues. Second, they pointed out that the civil case was mainly about economic abuse, which, remember, was never even on the table in the criminal trial. Third, and this is a big one,
The husband was acquitted because there was insufficient evidence to meet that super high criminal standard. But that same evidence could easily be enough to meet the lower civil standard. And finally, the remedies are totally different. The criminal court could never have ordered him to provide housing or pay maintenance. So those specific issues were actually being heard for the very first time in the civil case.
So there you have it, the final word from the court. Being found not guilty in a criminal cruelty case does not put up a wall that blocks a civil case for domestic violence based on the same events. Because the legal questions, the standards of proof, and the ultimate goals are all completely different, it is simply not double jeopardy. Puzzle solved.
Okay, so we've cracked the puzzle. But let's talk about why this one judgment is so important. What's the real-world impact for everybody involved?
This ruling gives everyone some critical clarity. For victims, this is huge. It confirms they can go after both punishment through the criminal system and protection through the civil system at the same time. And losing in one doesn't automatically kill the other. For someone who's been accused, it means a not guilty verdict in criminal court isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card for civil duties like financial support. For the courts, it's a clear instruction. Don't just toss out a domestic violence case because a related criminal case didn't succeed. And for the law itself, it reinforces this idea that you can have these parallel legal tracks that offer different kinds of justice for the same situation.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to chew on, right? This ruling opens up multiple paths to justice, and that's a really powerful tool for protecting people. But how does a system make sure that those multiple paths are used for genuine relief and not to unfairly harass someone through endless lawsuits? It's a really delicate balance, and it's one that cases just like this one force us to constantly think about. It's a puzzle that goes way beyond just this one case.